Welcome to a special class. Bezrat Hashem. Let me make sure this sound is working well. I think so. Okay. We should be good. So today's class is going to be, because someone sparked my my excitement regarding the renewed effort, the renewal of the war in Israel, and the destruction to finally obliterate Hamas. This is what happened now this week. The ceasefire is over, and Israel rolls up its sleeves again and is re-engaging in Gaza with the intention of the complete eradication of Hamas. That's the objective. And what's interesting about that is that could not have happened in a more appropriate time based on what we know from our sages regarding the final eradication of Amalek. So we know that we just celebrated Purim over the past weekend, and Purim is all about, or a lot about, the victory of good over evil, of holiness over the impure forces, and primarily the forces, the destruction and the defeat of Amalek, because Haman was from the descendants of Amalek. Now Amalek, as we know, is considered God's arch enemy, and it's the war that it's a nation or a klipa, an impurity, and it has physical embodiment as well, but it's a force within the world that is the antithesis to God and to holiness. And the coming of Mashiach is very much related to the destruction of evil and its final elimination, and that evil that we're talking about is Amalek. Now, who is Amalek? It's one of the descendants of Esav. However, exactly to identify who they are is generally genealogically hard to come about. Who exactly, what, where, and when. But sometimes just by looking at the symptoms, you can, just like a doctor can come to an understanding of a diagnosis of a certain disease by looking at the symptoms of how it acts and how it's behaving. So when we look at certain things, we can identify Amalek. Being that we know now very much that we are at the threshold of the redemption, we are at Mashiach's times, and Mashiach's coming is connected to the eradication of Amalek. So it would only make, and as we're going to speak of, and we spoke about in earlier classes, how Hamas has all the signs that Hamas is this battle between Israel, the Jewish people, and Hamas is the battle to destroy Amalek. Hamas has all the fingerprints and all the signs, if you might say, all the symbols of Amalek. And so what's exciting about it is we know that Purim is when we celebrate the triumph over Amalek. But we know that Amalek attacked the Jewish people. They're a klipa, they're a force of darkness throughout the ages. However, their main confrontation with the Jewish people comes at certain times. Although they're always there backing a force and a campaign against holiness and against godliness. The Amalek is the continuation of the snake. The snake is a representative of Satan, of the Samach Mem, of the Sitra Achra. It's all one line, and it manifests in its strongest, most comprehensive manner in Amalek. So on Purim is when we had the victory over Amalek, and as I mentioned earlier, the times that Amalek came and fought against the Jewish people specifically was when we went out of Egypt. So that was the first confrontation, when Amalek came and waged war against the Jewish people right after the splitting of the sea. And it's already then that you can see God's vengeance. And you can see that this war was not a simple war, because it wasn't just fought militarily, it had to be fought with powerful spiritual forces. As we know that Moses appoints Joshua, Yeshua, to go out and lead the battle. And where did Moshe go? He went on top of a hill, on top of a mountain, on top of a hill. And over there, he was engaged in intense meditation or intense battle. That's what he was doing against the supernal forces from above. The Zohar says that when Amalek came to fight against the Jewish people, Moshe saw that the Samach Mem, which means the Satan himself, came to assist. Why did Moshe take this so seriously? It's an enemy. Okay, why was this such a major battle? You can see from God's response at the end of the battle, but also just from the preparation. How Moshe sends Joshua out, and he himself doesn't participate. He goes on top of a mountain, together with Aaron, the high priest, and Hur, his nephew, and the three of them are engaging. And Moshe was fasting all day long and is up on the mountain, and he's really, really, really employing all of his spiritual powers to defeat this power. So the Zohar says was because Moshe immediately detected that the entire forces of evil ensembled against him, against the Jewish people, and coming about, their agents was Amalek down here below, but this was just an agent representing the essence of darkness, the essence of evil. As we say, the Samach Mem himself, the Sitra Achra, what we call the Satan himself, came down to assist Amalek. And the Zohar says that this war was a war b'chol Sitrin. This wasn't just, when we fought the various different nations, when the Jewish people went in to conquer the land of Israel, we know that every nation represents a certain impurity. But those impurities are only particulars. They are specific powers. It's this evil or that evil. So it comes and it negates against one particular force of holiness. But Amalek is the all-inclusive. It's the entire package. It's the entire package of evil. It's we might call it the soul of evil that is confronting the innermost of Kedusha, of holiness. And this was such a great battle that happened at the beginning of time, again at the beginning of Jewish history. Then we have another major confrontation was when God sends the first Jewish king, because the Jewish people have been given a mitzvah to eradicate Amalek. God says, I will never forget what Amalek has done to you. And God makes us remember the venom and to remember and keep an animosity going against Amalek. That's how terrible, that's how vicious, that's how evil Amalek is. That God doesn't allow us to forgive. Usually forgiveness is a holy trait. Over here, God says, I don't allow you to forgive. Remember what Amalek did to the Jewish people and go out and defeat Amalek. But we know, as the sages tell us, that the mitzvah to destroy Amalek requires us to have first a king. We appoint a king, and then the king destroys Amalek. The Talmud tells us 3 mitzvahs the Jewish people were given to implement when they come into the land of Israel. One is to appoint a king, the other one was to destroy Amalek, and thirdly is to build the temple. And it kind of has to go in this order. Having first the king, then only with the king do we have the power to fight against Amalek. And again, in the first war against Amalek, it was Moshe who was also a king. Vayihi b'Yeshurun melech, that Moshe Rabbeinu was considered to be a king amongst Yeshurun. Yeshurun is one of the names of the Jewish people. Moshe is our king. So through Moshe can lead us into battle. And then when the Jewish people finally had an official position of king, which was King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, then God instructed Samuel, to tell Shaul to lead the Jewish people into battle to eradicate Amalek, and it was an opportune time for the complete eradication of Amalek, which would have paved the way that the first temple could have been the third temple. But in the end, King Saul futched. He didn't manage to fight the war the way God wanted him to do it. He left over remnants of Amalek, and that war failed. Just like the first victory of Joshua over Amalek was also incomplete. Because if it would have been a completed physical victory, it would have decimated Amalek completely. But the verse doesn't say that. The verse says that also implies how powerful Amalek is. That it says that Joshua, even with the assistance of Moses, sitting on top of the mountain, it says standing on top of the mountain, Vayachloish. Actually, it says Moshe sat down. They brought him a stone, and Moshe sat down, and he held it, and Aaron and Hur were holding his hands up, helping him. And I guess that Moshe had to sit was also an implication of the power that he was up against, that it weakened him, that Moshe had to sit down. But another indication is that the verse says, Vayachloish Yeshua Amalek. Yeshua weakened Amalek. It doesn't say he destroyed them. As we see, there were still, the enemy continues on. And the same weakness that somehow Yeshua could not finish the job, but Yeshua wasn't his fault. He did whatever he can. King Saul was given the opportunity to destroy him completely, but he failed. And he weakened Agag, the king of Amalek, and the armies of Amalek, but he didn't destroy them completely. And they were able to regenerate, and they came around the block again. When? Again, you see it, Amalek is always coming before God moves into this world. Amalek comes in to interject. It's very interesting. Think about it. The first time they came was before the Jewish people received the Torah, and they were going to build the Mishkan. So Amalek is trying to cut the world off from God and trying to interfere with God having a home in this world. That's the first time. Second time was before the first temple was going to be built. We establish a king. We're ready to build a temple. What happens? Amalek is there. This time they didn't attack, but we were told to go eradicate Amalek. Because as long as Amalek is in the world, or as long as Amalek is a force within this world, it interferes, it's blocking, it's jamming, and not allowing the divine presence to enter to settle down into the world. So Saul weakened Amalek, but didn't destroy them. At the end of the first exile, the Babylonian exile, or call it the second exile, which is second to the Egypt. At the end of that exile, or we call it actually the third exile, because it's at the end of the Babylonian exile came the Persian exile. And at the conclusion of that, which we were going to build the second temple, which potentially again had the ability to kind of be the ultimate temple. But it wasn't. So again, we faced the war against Amalek. And this time Amalek came in the form of Haman and his anti-Semites. And their objective, so we see what their objective is. Amalek showed its true face at that point, was lahashmid laharig la'abed kala Yehudim, to annihilate, to destroy, to remove from the face of the earth all of the Jewish people. On Purim, again, the Jewish people defeated Amalek, but it wasn't a complete destruction. Amalek still remained present in the world. So the war in Genesis, I'm sorry, in Exodus, in Shemos, Parshat Shalach, the Torah says God makes a shavua. God makes an oath. He puts his hand on his throne and he makes an oath, and he says, Muhammad Hashem, that God says, I will wage war, I will fight a battle, Ba'amalek against Amalek, midor dor, from generation to generation. And the Targum says this is referring to all the way to the generation of Mashiach. So when is Amalek going to be defeated? Finally, in the generation of Mashiach. Mashiach himself will destroy Amalek. It's going to be the final battle. And only then can we have the third temple. So, when is that eradication supposed to be complete? So I want to share with you a very interesting Zohar. The Zohar says in Parshas Pinchas, Ubachodesh Harishon, this is in the portion of Zohar, Daf Reish Mem Tes, page 249 in the Zohar. It says, Bachodesh Harishon, in the first month, my Rishon, what is first? Man Rishon do Nisan, that's Nisan. Tamon oilida sahi chaya. Over there, this living being is born. Who is this living being? Who is the living being that's born? I'll give my own interpretation. I didn't pay attention to this passage of the Zohar before. I just looked this up a second before the class, and I was looking at the second part. I wasn't even looking at the first part, but it's interesting. That's when this living being is born. Must be Mashiach, that is born in the month of Nisan, as we shall still speak. Nisan, to fulfill, in fulfillment of what the masters of the Mishnah say, B'Nisan nigalu, in Nisan we will redeemed, U'B'Nisan asidin li Geulah, and in Nisan we're going to be redeemed. And listen to this. U'Ba'aba asar delay, and on the 14th day of Nisan, Vayomer, it says in the pasuk, Ki yad al keiska, there is a hand on the throne of God. The 14th of Nisan is Erev Pesach. This year falls out on Shabbos, because Pesach, Passover, is going to be Saturday night. On Shabbos. But on the 14th of Nisan, there says there is a hand. When it talks about the eradication of Amalek, it says there is a hand on the throne of God. Milchama Lashem ba'Amalek, a war against Amalek, midor dor, from generation to generation. From here we learn out that God's hand is on his throne, in which he promises, he makes an oath that he will destroy Amalek. That's what it takes. The destruction of Amalek takes God making an oath. It can't be any other way. It's God's battle. But the Zohar plays on the word Yad, that Yad also means the 14th. The 14th day of Nisan is Taman Oima La'abara Ma'alma. That's when Amalek is going to be completely removed from the world. Zara, the Esav, the descendants, the seed of Esav, of Esau, Amalekim, the Amalekites. Bahu Zimna, and that's the reason Hashem says, pull yourself away from impurity, and that's the day to which we offer the Paschal Lamb, the Korban Pesach. That's also the day that we have to rid the world from chametz, rid our properties from chametz. Chametz is all 11. We do it not on Passover, we do it the day before Pesach. And we know that the night before Pesach, or L'Arba'as, or the night of the 14th day, we do B'dikas chametz. We're beginning to search for the chametz in order to clean all leftover chametz out from our house and burn it. The burning of the chametz that we do on the 14th day of Nisan. Now this year we're going to do that on the 13th, because on Shabbos we can't burn the chametz. We're going to do the burning of the chametz, and we're also going to do bedikas chametz on Thursday night, a night before already, because we can't do it on Friday night. But really it belongs to the 14th. So on the 14th, they're ridding, the removal of the chametz, of the which represents all the chametz, is arrogance. And one of the qualities of Amalek is that it's full of arrogance. It's inflated ego. So that Amalek is destroyed. The Zohar says the destruction of Amalek is on the 14th day of Nisan. That's when they're going to be finished. Kaput. Amalek is gone. Now, okay, does that mean that we have to wait to the 14th of Nisan for this to happen, which is in less than a month? But so there is a fascinating, this is what I mentioned earlier, what sparked this entire class, is someone shared with me a passage from the great Hasidic master, the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar. Reb Tzvi Elamelach of Dinov. A great Kabbalist and a great Hasidic innovator. Incredible teachings. And in his Sefer, he comes with an incredible teaching. He basically says the time of the destruction of Amalek is between Purim and Pesach. And the grand finale of its destruction is on Erev Pesach. And he says these words, Kabbalah b'yadenu. He says, V'hine makubal b'yadenu. We have a Kabbalah in our hands, Kabbalah sakadmoinim, a Kabbalah from the ancient ones. Ayam b'tikunei zoyar ubereya mehemna. This is this Zohar. Ashala asid b'mehera b'yameinu. That in the future, in our days, Milchemes Amalek, the war of Amalek, u'michiyasai, and its eradication, year be'erev Pesach. is going to be on Erev Pesach. It's going to be the complete eradication of Amalek. So here you have it. He says, the beginning is B'yom HaPurim. The beginning starts on the day of Purim, because that's when we fight Amalek. V'hasiyum, and the completion. V'hagamar, and the end of it, Be'erev Pesach, is before Pesach. So the Zohar seems only to say on the 14th. The Zohar doesn't say the full month. But the Bnei Yissaschar, in his long piece of it, which I'll share with you, an amazing explanation, explains that it's the entire month from Purim to Pesach. So what's exciting? Israel initiated its desire right now and its campaign to destroy Hamas completely after Purim, 2-3 days after Purim. Tuesday was when, I think Tuesday in the middle of the night, Monday night, going to Tuesday is when the campaign started. So it's just 2-3 days after Purim. And probably they had the beginning planning or whatever it was within a day or two before. And that's when this campaign. So first of all, let's establish who Hamas is. Why? What's the sign that Hamas might be Amalek? So remember, we spoke about this a lot in classes last year. The fact that they chose October 7th to attack. So there is a Rashi in Parshas Pinchas, where Rashi says, based on a verse where the pasuk says that Vayishma HaKnani Melech Arad, that the king of Canaan, the king of Arad, heard Vayishma HaKnani Melech Arad, Kiba Yisrael Derech HaSarim, that the Knani, the king of Arad, heard that the Jewish people have come through a certain passageway, and they're getting ready to come into the land. And what happened? And he comes and he wages war against the Jewish people. Vayesh mimenu shevi, and he takes captives. He takes hostages. Rashi over there explains that this king of Canaan, living in the south, it refers to him as living in the south, that was the Amalekim. They were not Canaanites. Canaanites is a different people. Canaanites are not descendants of Esau. They're from the 7 nations. But the ones, they were Amalekim that masqueraded like Canaanim. Just like these Hamas people masquerade as if they're inhabitants of the land, which they really aren't. And it's pure a war against, as they call it, El Quds. It's a war against Jerusalem. It's a war to stop God's presence, Hashem's presence, the building of the third temple. That's its ambition. So Rashi says over there that what did Amalek care? Why did they attack? So Rashi says because they heard that Aaron the high priest passed away, and the Jewish people lost their clouds of glory. Because the clouds of glory were surrounding the Jewish people because in the merit of Aaron, the high priest. When Aaron passed away, these clouds left them. So the Jewish people were exposed. So Amalek attacked. So I found it then very interesting that the day that Hamas decided to attack was the day after Sukkot, on Shmini Atzeres, which is the last day of Sukkot, but it's not part of the holiday of Sukkot. And in Israel, one does not sit in a sukkah on that day. Sukkah is over. In other words, the day that the Ananei HaKavod aren't there in a sense. And that's when they attacked. And again, it says that those who come from the south, and that the fact that they took hostages. Now we know that the most prominent effect of October 7th that has been dominating the news, dominating the entire story till today, is the hostages. I mean, the massacre and all that was ferocious. But what kept the evil going, what kept this campaign going, was that they snatched hostages. And it's, I think, the only place in the Torah where it discusses hostages being taken. So that itself is evidence, already enough evidence, that the attack by Hamas was an attack by the modern incarnation of Amalek, the final war of Amalek against the Jewish people. Now, one of the things that Amalek did back then was that they were mutilating Jewish bodies. In the war of Moshe, They were cutting off the genitals. That's what it says. And they were throwing it above to poke fun of God, basically about circumcision. That was Amalek's the sages derive from it that this was what Amalek was doing. One of the key features of the horrific attack of October 7th was the mutilation. What is the word? The mutilation. That's what. The mutilation. It's such a horrible word that I never can say that word out of my mouth. Looks like, thank God I have no connection to something like this. The mutilation. A Jew doesn't have any connection to such disgusting behavior. Mutilation of Jewish bodies. It wasn't enough that they killed people. It was intent. Today, literally today, in the United Kingdom, in England, they produced a report on October 7th. I forgot who was the one who issued the inquiry, in which they've been doing an inquiry for months and months and months to document with clear evidence the horrors that took place on October 7th. And today they issued that. And when you look, I didn't look through it, but I looked through I read a short, what's it called again, summary of that report. And there is a particular emphasis on the mutilation of bodies, which you see is literally the staple of Amalek. That's what they do. Now to the world of Gematria, which is really going to solidify this. Hamas, the numeric value of the name Hamas, of the Hebrew, if you spell Hamas in Hebrew, Ches, Aleph, Mem, Samach, Hamas. Sometimes if you try to find it biblically, it's without the Aleph. It's Kimala Aretz Hamas. Hamas is violence. But if you're looking on line, look in Wikipedia, how do they spell? I typed in Hamas. Look in Hebrew, when they write Hamas, it's spelled with an Aleph. Ches, Aleph, Mem, Samach. Or maybe the Aleph is after the Mem, between the Mem and the Samach, sure, but Ches, Aleph, Mem, Samach. So Ches, Aleph, Mem, Samach, the Gematria is 109. If you take 109 and you add to it, what did we say earlier? Amalek is just a manifestation of the snake, which the snake is a manifestation of and an agent of the Satan, which is known, his name, the name of the spiritual angel of Satan is in Hebrew spelled Samach Mem Aleph Lamed. Numeric value 131. 109 plus 131 equals 240. Again, one more time. Hamas plus Samach Mem Aleph Lamed. Hamas plus Satan. Add the two up together and you get 240. 240 is the exact numeric value of Amalek. Amalek is 240. So there you have it. Amalek's energy, Hamas's energy, its force, its power that it embodies is satanic energy. And therefore the eradication of Hamas is the eradication of Satan from the world, of the Samach Mem from the world. The Hamas agents down here are just simple bodies for the Sitra Achra for the other side. And that's why you find that all evil in the world identifies with Hamas. That's like they fight with Hamas and support Hamas. The final embodiment of Klippa and Sitra Achra. And they're trying to keep Hamas alive. Like the UN and France and the UN Guterres today condemns Israel renewal of the campaign. And Israel is saying, give me back my hostages. We saw what they did already to the Bibas family. The world should have been up in arms like crazy after that. How dare you're still holding on to hostages, to innocent civilians. But instead, the world goes crazy. Israel is bombing again, yeah? Because you're still holding our hostages. And you're planning attacks. You're rearming yourself, of course. So everybody knows Hamas must go. So when Israel is doing it, but the world, so many of the anti-Semites or in general powers of the world that should be completely unrelated to Hamas are coming in to kind of prop Hamas up and to give them strength and to keep them alive. Because subconsciously, this is the last stand of Satan. So when we hear that it's precisely between Purim and Pesach that there is now a campaign for the final destruction of Hamas. And remember, the first time Israel went in and was fighting the battle, it was under the Biden administration. Israel had its hands tied behind its back. It could not fight. It politically couldn't fight because it wasn't getting politically, it wasn't getting the legitimacy, the backing from the United States of America. And the United States of America is a big backing. And even physically, arms were continuously being withheld and threatened to be withheld even more from Israel. That Israel needed these arms, these weapons. Now, with the Trump administration, Israel has been given the full green light to do what it needs to do. There is hope, and there is a lot to anticipate. That now Israel is not going to fight with gloves on. It's going to remove its gloves, and it's going to eradicate and do the circumcision that it needs to do, completely erase Amalek from the face of the planet. Interesting between Purim and Pesach. Now, I'd like to share the full thought of the Bnei Yissaschar. It's an amazing thought. Why? What's the significance of this time? The idea is as follows. When God gives us the instruction to destroy Amalek, the mitzvah, the commandments of God regarding Amalek is threefold. One, God says, Zechor asher asa Amalek, to remember, to keep the memory of Amalek alive. The second one is, God says, is a prohibition. Lo tishkach, you may not forget. And the third one is, Timche ezecher Amalek, to actually go about and destroy the remnants of Amalek, the physical elimination of Amalek from the face of the earth. So again, one is that we should recall, we should remember it. One is that we shouldn't forget. Two of them are positive mitzvahs. To recall is a positive mitzvah. Positive in the sense it involves an action. And recalling actually means not just recalling in our head. Recalling means to verbalize it. So we know once a year we do a special reading of the Torah. It was 2 weeks ago on Shabbat, Shabbos before Purim, in which we read the Torah in the fulfillment of this biblical commandment to remember what Amalek did by stating it. The biggest memory we can have is by reading it from a Torah scroll. Those words are divine words, powerful words. And that keeps the memory of the evil of Amalek alive so that we know to take care of business. So that's a positive commandment. The other positive commandment is to eradicate, to destroy Amalek, to go to war against Amalek. Fine, and then there is another mitzvah which is a prohibitive commandment. Alosa say, lo tishkach, you may not forget. So why these three commandments? Says the Bnei Yissaschar that these three commandments apply or represent thought, speech, and action. Thought is do not forget. Not forgetting means keep it in your mind. That's in thought. Not to forget is not an action. Not to forget is not speech. Not to forget is keep the memory, keep it in our consciousness. And then the mitzvah to remember what Amalek did is a mitzvah of speech, which means, as we said earlier, it's a mitzvah to read it at least once a year. We do a reading of it. And the action of the mitzvah is what Israel is doing in Gaza right now, is the destruction of Amalek in the literal sense. 3 mitzvahs: thought, speech, and action. Why the mitzvah in thought, speech, and action? Because Amalek is a impurity, as we spoke earlier, that infects. It's a type of virus that infects the entire system. It infects thought, speech, and action, or more bepnimius, on a deeper level. It affects the chabad, the intelligence. It affects the chagas, the emotions, chesed, gevura, teferes, which are the emotions. And it also affects the netzach, hod, yesod, malchus, which are more the action emotions, the emotions that drive action and drive behavior. Because, as we'll see soon, Amalek is the power of the dat, the impure force of das, which das means knowledge. Therefore, Amalek is rooted in the Eitz HaDas, in the tree of knowledge, the impure knowledge, not the holy das. There's 2 levels. There's das tov vera, good das and bad das. Amalek is the evil das. And we know that das, knowledge, is the battery, it's the juice, it's the energy, it's the power behind every single force in the human being is all powered by das. That's why the Zohar refers to das as maftecha. It's the key to every experience, human experience. Every one of the emotions it connects the intelligence to the emotions. The das is, we'll soon see, we'll speak about it a little later in the class. Das is the power of bonding and connectivity. It's what connects everything. It's the attachment. It's the power of being present. And there, obviously that exists in holiness. And Amalek is the power that fights that das and introduces an unholy das. And that unholy das, as we said earlier, is an infection. It's a virus that impedes every section, thought, speech, and action. And that's why the fight against Amalek has to be on all levels. That's also one of the meanings of Mochamal Hashem Amalek, midor dor. Dor means from row to row, every row of existence and every generation, but also as things are stacked up one on top of the other, all the powers of the soul, there needs to be a war against Amalek. And in general, the 3 powers, intelligence, emotions, and behavior and action, or thought, speech, and action, or on a deeper level of soul, nefesh, ruach, neshama. Neshama is thought, ruach is emotions, or is speech. The neshama is chabad, intelligence and thought. Ruach, spirit, is emotions and speech. And nefesh is netzach, hod, yesod, malchut, the lower emotions which drive behavior and action. That's nefesh, ruach, neshama. Amalek is the entire structure of impurity. So the war against Amalek needs to be on all 3 levels. 3 mitzvahs. Now, when you take 3 times the word Amalek, okay, we're going to be having a lot of interesting Gematria today. When you take the word Amalek, which equals 240, and you make that 3 times, because as we said, Amalek exists in the head, it exists in the heart, and exists in the behavior, the 3 mitzvahs. So what do we get? 240 times 3 is 720. So 720 is an important number over here. Why? All of existence, everything in the world is related to the number 720. Why? What's the first word in the Torah through which everything, all of existence, everything was created? The first word of the Torah is the word Bereshis. Bereshis is Gematria 720. No, I'm sorry. Bereshis is not Gematria 720. Rather, sorry, I quoted that wrong. There are 720 different combinations that you can make from the word Bereshis. Because in Sefer Yetzirah it says, in the book of formation it says, that a word that is made up of 6 letters gets 720 different, you can Scrabble, you play Scrabble, take the letters, and you want to make different combinations. A letter, a word with 6 letters gives you 720 words. You can combine it in 720 different ways. Take out your ask Google that question. I did it today. You can ask Google that question, and it answered me right away. I said, a 6-letter word, how many combinations can you make? And the answer came up immediately, 720 different combinations. So the Bnei Yissaschar says, the 720 combinations of the word Bereshis is the underpinning of all of creation. We know that we know that God created the world. We know God created the world with 10 utterances. But when you take a look in the utterance, it only mentions 9 times utterances during creation. Vayomer, 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 God said, it only mentions it 9 times. The sages answer it, and they say Bereshis is also an utterance. Bereshis nama maimer. But if Bereshis is an utterance, why doesn't Bereshis say Vayomer? It should have said 10. So it says that Bereshis is the one thought that includes all the other 9 thoughts. All the 9 utterances. It's like when a person thinks, thought you can do in 1 second, you can think what takes you 10 sentences. In thought, things are far more compressed, condensed. So the cosmos are all thought into existence in the one word Bereshis. Think about this, the Bnei Yissaschar says. Every single event and every single feature that there is in history, in all of time and space, are all related to one of these 720 different combinations of the word Bereshis. It's the one thought that powers everything. Now, why? Here's another cool thought. Hold it. 720 is 10 times. 720 is 10 times 72. 72 is we know God's name is the name of 72, but also Chesed, kindness, is Gematria 72. Ches Samach Daled. Samach and Daled is 64 plus Ches, which is 8, 72. So 72 times 10 is 720. Now, why Chesed? What does it have to do with Chesed? Well, the verse says, Olam, the world, Chesed Yibaneh. The world is built on kindness. The motivation to create and to sustain and give a life to the world is God's infinite kindness. But why 10? Because that kindness manifests in all 10 sphirot, in all the 10 attributes, which are the building blocks of creation, which later translate into the 10 utterances. What's fueling it all? It's God's kindness. In a sense, all of creation is an expression of chesed 10 times. It's one chesed, which later multiplies itself 10 times into every one of the utterances, which is, God said, let there be light, because God wanted to do kindness. God said, let the water split, because God wanted to do kindness, and let there be a firmament. Every single feature that was spoken of, and then all the, on a more Kabbalistic level, all the emanations of God are driven by kindness. 10 times chesed is 720. So all of that manifests in the word bereshis. Therefore, we say, this gets even more interesting. In davening, we say, Uvechein yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu. Everybody knows the prayer of yishtabach. Now, on a regular day, we don't say Uvechein yishtabach. We just say yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu, right? Yishtabach shimcha. But on Shabbos, we say Uvechein. We add the word Ubechein yishtabach shimcha. Yishtabach shimcha means may your name be praised. The word yishtabach is Gematria 720. Because when we say the word yishtabach, we are elevating all the 720 different combinations of the word. This is what it says in Arizal and Pri Etz Chaim. When we say yishtabach, we're basically in the end, we're completing Psukkah de Zimra. We concluded saying all the verses of song in which we're calling to all of creation to connect to God. We're bringing forth all the energies of all of creation to unify everything into the elevation. We say the word Yishtabach because Yishtabach is the 720, the 10 times 72. The word Bereshis, which includes all of existence, and it's all Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkin. Then has a whole different, deeper meaning when you say Yishtabach Shimcha. Everything, every combination of Bereshis, which is the sum totality of all of existence, 720 times, 720 different combinations of the word Bereshis. All of it is Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. All of it is being elevated to God. And therefore we add the word, in the Arizal says you have to say the word Ubechein. Because the word Kain, just Chain, Chaf Nun, is 720. You'll say, no, Chaf Nun, Kain is 70. It's not 720. No. Because we know there is in Gematria, the Hebrew alphabet, Gematria only goes to 400. Taf is 400. Kuf is 100. Reish is 200. Shin is 300. And Taf is 400. And you would expect, why don't you go to 500, 600, 700, 800, and 900? So that you can lift it up. And the answer is you do. The 5 double letters, Menatzpach, starting with Chaf, Mem, Nun, Pei, Tzadik, which are 4 double letters that there is in the Aleph base, 5 double letters. Those 5 double letters are, the Chaf is 500. The Mem, the end of Mem, the Mem Sofit is 600. The Nun, the end Nun is 700. The end Pei is 800. And the end Tzadik is 900. If that's the case, says the Arizal, the word Chain is a Chaf and a long Nun. So it's 720. Ubechain, Bechain is 720. And the word Bechain itself, without doing this Nun, the Nun, we just said that the Nun could be considered 700. But there's another system in Gematria where Nun is just 50. So then the word Bechain is 72. Just the word bichain is 72. So Chain itself, Kain Yishtabach is 720, like the number Yishtabach. But the word Bichain is 72, and it's 72 times 10. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkein. He says something amazingly beautiful, not in this piece, but the new Bnei Yissaschars, which are so beautiful. They have all this, they collect from all the different teachings that he says, and they put it on the bottom. So there's literally like a playground of amazing things. He says an amazing teaching. It says that when God tells us not to go to sorcery and not to go to any magicians or not to go to any people who use all kinds of impure powers, people that look into the crystal balls, the psychics and this and that, to try to alter one's mazel and one's luck and one's thing, and to tell you about the various different constellations, or in general idol worship, which utilized all these methods of manipulating the various different forces. So God says that God left that to the nations, that they can get confused with that. But it says because these nations, referring to the nations who lived in the land of Israel, the ancient nations who lived in the land of Israel, these nations, they go to Ma'onanim. They go to the Ma'onanim, means people who predict the times. Kosmim are people that manipulate things through various different magic or whatever it is. Yishma'u, they listen to them. But to you, the Jewish people, the verse says, I forgot the Loikein Nasan Lecha Hashem Elokecha. Simply, it means to you, God, to you, the Jewish people, God did not give you those methods. They're not meant for you. Loikein Nasan Hashem Lecha Hashem Elokecha. Instead, God gave you a prophet. The verse continues. Hashem gave you a prophet. But the Bnei Yissaschar says, no, you got to read it like this. Since God gave the Jewish people mastery since he gave us the Torah, he gave us the Bereshis. The entire Torah is an emanation of the word Bereshis, which is the key to what? To the creative power of the universe. And what did we say? Everything that happens in the world is from one of these 720 tzirufim, 720 combinations of the word Bereshis. So when things are going well, great. When things are not going well, the great tzaddikim, Loikein, Nosan Hashem Lecha. Hashem gives the Jewish people the power to say Loikein. What's Cain? Cain is 720. That what? We do not like this combination. Let's rearrange the letters in a different combination. And then it changes everything. Tzaddikim are able to make the great righteous people, because they are so close to God, not through magic, not through powers of impurity, not through work, but directly being connected to Hashem, they can rearrange the tzir. Again, Cain is 720. If the nun is 700, like Cain, they can say the present combination of the one of the 700. Let's say now the world is operating through number 543 of the combinations of Bereshis, and the Tzadik sees that things are not pleasing to us and it's not working out. So he, in his closeness to Hashem, he can rearrange that combination to set a different setting. And when there's a different setting, everything realigns. Everything is then rearranged. The entire puzzle of all of existence is rearranged through the Loikein. And that's why he says, by the way, the main point is that after God created every creation, every day of creation, what does it say in the end? Hashem said, "Let there be light," or the verse says, "Vayehi chen," and it was so. I don't have a Bereshis Chumash in front of me, but the words that it says is Vayehi chen. It doesn't say it the first day, I think, by any Chumash. Take a look. First day it says, Vayihi Or. Oh, but from the second day and onward, it says, Vayihi Kain. Hashem said, let there be a separation between the upper waters and the lower waters, Vayihi Kain, and it was so. Then it says, Vayihi Kain, and it was so. Vayihi Kain, and it was so. What does it have to say? And it was Kain. It was Kain. It's very interesting. Which word? Kain. What's Kain? It was so, meaning one of the 720, because Kain is 720. Vayihi Kain, it was so, meaning it manifested the potential in Bereshis that has the potential at every type of combination. It manifested in this particular way to create this particular portion of the creation. But what tzaddikim are able to do, this is what's so, I love that teaching. What the tzaddikim are able to do is they're able to say, Loi Kain, not so, and rearrange creation the way they see fit. So 720 is a very important number. Now, Amalek, 3 times we said earlier, is numeric value 720. What does that mean? That they are the antithesis. Amalek is the satanic force, the antithesis to the entire structure. Again, the entire structure of existence is built on the 720. 10 times ayin beis, 10 times chesed. The klipa is like a monkey, imitates. Its imitation is in the same form. 720. 3 times Amalek. When God tells us to eradicate Amalek, we have to eradicate it totally on all 3 levels. Amalek of the head, Amalek of the heart, and Amalek of action. Thought, speech, and action. And that's why the time to eradicate Amalek, according to the Bnei Yisachar, is from Purim to Pesach. How many days are there from Purim to Pesach? 30 days. From Purim to Erev Pesach, because Purim is the 14th day, Erev Pesach, which is the final eradication of Amalek, as we said earlier, is Yod al Keis Khan. The 14th day of Erev Pesach is the complete removal of Amalek from the world. Why? But it's in 30 days starting on Purim. And it fits halachically. The law is that 30 days before a holiday, you have to start learning, preparing for the holiday. Mentally, emotionally, you have to start preparing for the holiday, spiritually, 30 days before. One should start learning the customs and the laws of the holiday 30 days before, which the sages have a discussion, the rabbis, the halachic authorities have a discussion if you're supposed to start literally on Purim. According to many opinions, you're supposed to start on Purim learning the laws of Pesach. What's the idea? Because from Purim to Pesach is one energy. Now, how many hours are there in a day? We all know that in a day there are 24 hours. In 30 days, there are 30 times 24. So I'm not going to spill the beans. I'll give you all a second to do your math. 30 times 24 is 720. So from Purim until the conclusion, till the last day, including the last day, the 14th day, Erev Pesach, there is exactly 720 hours. Those 720 hours are the hours of the destruction of Amalek. So that by the time Pesach comes, there's no Amalek anymore in the world. And we can have complete redemption. So then I think it's pretty neat that now we're finding this war going on in Gaza against Hamas. It's particularly now. And it started after Purim, leading us into Pesach. May they be very successful, and may be Amalek completely be obliterated. So what does it have to do with me and you? I'm not in the Tzahal. I can support it, and we can support this campaign, but what does it have to me and you? It's very much connected to us. Because spiritually, we all have to fight our own Amalek in our own heart. And now is the time to rid the world of it. By the way, he says an interesting thing. That one more last thought regarding the completion. According to this idea, we begin getting rid of the chametz. If Amalek if Amalek is chametz, and that's why on Erev Pesach, on the day before Pesach, we burn the chametz, we get rid of them. So that would mean that from Purim we start getting rid of the chametz. So I know that my wife, the holy Rebbitzins of the world, they start preparing for Pesach pretty early, but you can't stop before Purim because on Purim is the biggest chametz day. Because everybody's bringing shalach manas, and there's all the hamantashin and all that comes in. But the day after Pesach, every woman every homekeeper is beginning to think of Pesach. You're already starting to figure out how you're going to start cleaning. But the Bnei Yissaschar says that it's actually halachically that way, in the sense that what? He says there is a question why we don't make a shechiyanu. When we do biur chametz, why don't we do a shechiyanu? Biur chametz is the search for the chametz and the burning of the chametz on Erev Pesach, on Pesach, on the day before Pesach. Why don't we do a shechiyanu? So what's a shechiyanu? Shechiyanu is a special blessing that we make when we do a mitzvah it's an unusual mitzvah, a mitzvah that comes around once a year. So before we blow the shofar, we say shechiyanu. We read the Megillah, we say shechiyanu. But when we get rid of the chametz, we don't make a shechiyanu. Why not? But now he says we understand. Because you actually made the shechiyanu when you started. When did you start? By the Megillah. When we bang Haman, when we all bang Haman, we're eradicating Amalek on Purim. That's already the beginning of the destruction of Hamas, of the Samach Mem, of the Satan. We're already beginning 30 days. So that's not the beginning of it. It's only when you start a mitzvah. So the shechiyanu that we do, I never thought about that. The shechiyanu that you do by Megillah should already be the shechiyanu for the destruction of all chametz from the world. And you see, what's chametz? Chametz is rising. Chametz is leavened bread, the bread rises. Amalek is 240. 240 is the exact gematria of the word rum. Rum means exalted. Amalek is full of pompous, full of himself. Like Haman says, who is greater than me? Who would the king want to honor? Anybody but me. He's full of arrogance, inflated ego. Okay, let's go back to me and you. What does this have to do with us? So I just want to do this very briefly. And that is that we know, I mentioned earlier, why is Amalek such a all-inclusive power? That is like, it affects every element. And God says to fight Amalek, it's like no hold, what is it called? No holds barred. What's the word? No bar, no bars. What's the thing? God is not. I just remember a phrase. I just don't know what it means. I mean, it means that nothing is held back. Something like that. No, you don't remember. Okay. In any case, I know someone is going to comment on it. That's good. So, God pulls all the, what is it called? Pulling all the, I don't know, no words today. Okay, it must be that the class is deeper than words. Everything is unleashed in this battle. Why? So I mentioned earlier that Amalek is the das, is related to the impure das. And therefore Amalek really is the antithesis to Moshe. Why is Amalek the antithesis of Moshe? Because Moshe is the das of holiness. Let's first explain for a moment why is das so important. So we know that the beginning of all destruction came when they ate from the tree of knowledge. Tree of knowledge is called the Eitz Hadas. It's explained in Kabbalah and in Chassidus. The das, as we mentioned earlier, is what gives life. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that das is the kiyum v'chayus kol hamidos. It's the substantiating power and the life of all the emotions. So what does that mean? A lot of times we find that you can have a lot of knowledge, you can read about things, but it doesn't excite. We can hear, we can read, we can connect, but why? Because we don't feel it. We're not connecting. It's like also, the das means to bond, to connect. So, for example, when you're learning something, you can just read it as information, especially when it comes to spirituality. When it comes to material, physical things, our das is very easily provoked because since we are material beings living in a material world, when we see a cupcake, the das kicks in very quickly. We feel the cupcake. We feel it very, very real. I'm giving a cupcake as an example. It's a cupcake. It's every other material, physical pleasure. It's like you sense it. You sense it. It's almost like you can't, you're aware of it, and then you can't divert your attention. Diverting one's attention means to disconnect from it. It's called hesach hadas. So with the material, physical things, usually if it's something that is appealing to us, when we make that connection, it's hard to disconnect. But in spirituality and spiritual matter, especially in godliness, it's the opposite. It's because it takes work to be able to bring the das. And what's the das? Das means that we activate we focus on something, and then we attach ourselves to it. And in this case, it's our connection to God and to godliness. When you have das, what it basically does is it makes whatever it is that you've become aware of, it becomes very real. It becomes a reality, and that reality forces or compels you to have a reaction. What Amalek wants to do is disconnect the holy das. When we went out in Egypt, one of the things it says, what was established by the Exodus, what was established by the Exodus in a very powerful way was the das. Through all the miracles, God keeps on repeating by the plagues, Laman das, so that you will know. Even Egypt will have das, will know. But definitely for the Jewish people. We had faith before, but faith can be a little bit more aloof and disconnected, that everything should come down into das. That God now becomes a very real entity. And therefore you can't disconnect from him for a moment. And God is life. And when you cleave to God, you're alive. And therefore, in every single thing, when we have real das, in every single thing we're doing, we're constantly thinking of the godliness of it. That's the das. Lose the das, and you're disconnected. You can have an ocean of knowledge, but you're not connecting to it. So the das is like the soul of everything. It's the bonding of everything. So of course there's holy das, there's the unholy das. See, when Adam and Eve were before they ate from the tree of knowledge, their das was godly das. They knew Hashem, and God was so vividly, and their awareness of the world and the material elements, the physical elements and the physical sensations were like, the world was more like something that, okay, the physicality and the pleasures of the physical material world was a secondary element. They were far more aware and conscious of God. You see, when the snake came, what does he start doing? He starts poisoning Eve with das, with impure das. Why? He starts telling her how the fruits are good and wonderful and they're luscious. And he starts to and it says she saw it, that the food is good to eat, and it smells so. It doesn't say smell actually, but it says all the other. It became a very sensual experience, and he evoked all the senses, which is what das really is, to connect to the physical material element of the world, and as a result of that, disconnect from the soul of it all, which is God. In other words, by doing that, She lost connection, but God said no. That should have been more powerful than anything else. God says no. God should be more real than the fruit and the tree, because God is the true light, the true energy of the fruit and the tree. But by the conversation and a interaction with the snake, the holy das disappeared, because the snake is the agent of impure das, and she starts having he's evoking the impure das of the tree, and then when she eats from the tree, for sure, it evokes and it produces in her bloodstream a disconnect from God and a deep connection to the material impure and physical things, including the impure elements within the world. Now we become very, very, very attached to the satanic elements of creation. That excites. That's naturally, instinctively what is inborn within a person to react to have an emotional bond with. And our work is to weaken the das of impurity and to replace it with the original das, which is the das of God. Now, the one super soul who is the embodiment of holy das, like Abraham is the embodiment of holy kindness, Isaac is the embodiment of holy Gevurah. Who is the embodiment of holy das? That's Moshe. Moshe is the das of the Jewish people. Kabbalistically, Moshe is the man of das. And through Moshe, we experience a full das in God, a connection to God. Who was the antithesis to Moshe? The Zohar says the antithesis to Moshe was another prophet, Bilaam. Bilaam was someone, the Bnei Yissaschar, Chassidus talks about this as well. Bilaam is the impure das. That's why Bilaam, the prophet Bilaam, it says, V'yodeya das elyon. He knew the supernal das. He was connected to impure das. And there's a lot to talk about that. Bilaam and Amalek are both, first of all, they're the same Gematria. No, they're not. Let me put it together. Maybe, yeah, let's see. No. They're not the same Gematria. But Bilaam and Amalek have a very interesting relationship between them. When you write the word Bilaam and you put Beis Lamed, this is what we do. You put Bilaam on the top, write the word Bilaam on two lines, Beis and Lamed, and beneath the Beis and the Lamed, put the last letters of Bilaam, Ayin Mem, like Bill. Now put Amalek next to it on the top line where you wrote the Beis and the Lamed. It's a shame I don't have a blackboard over here. Next to the word Beis Lamed on the top, put the first two letters of Amalek, Ayin Mem, and put beneath the Ayin Mem, Lamed Kuf. So now when you read it, you spelled Bil like this, Beis Lamed, Ayin Mem, and you wrote Amalek, Ayin Mem. Now when you read the two lines, on the top line you'll have the word Bilam, and the bottom line you'll have the word Amalek, which means these are two halves of one entity, Bilam and Amalek. And that's the reason, because Amalek is also rooted in the same impurity as Bilam, in the unholy das. This will explain a phenomenal thing I'm thinking about Hamas, is that Hamas was able to create a certain das, a certain identification, a certain bonding between all the forces of impurity. You have college campuses filled with young people all over, masks on their faces, all over, campaigning, and all over the world. I saw today in Switzerland, full of anti-Semitism, standing for the Palestinians. What do they have with them? Why are they standing with them? There is a das. In other words, they create a certain connection that people sympathize and connect to a terrorist organization, to pure evil. Social media all over the place. People across the world bonding with them. It's really interesting. It's an impurity. You don't see anywhere. I mean, there's people, simply people say, okay, it's anti-Semitism because people hate the Jews. So therefore, if Jews are fighting someone, they'll stand for the person that... No, there is a certain deep connection that Hamas was able to achieve across the world, to have a hiskashrus, to have a bond with them. Millions of people bonding with them. It's the das of Klippa. How do we eradicate the das of Klippa? So the first thing is the strengthening of the das of holiness. When our holy das is activated, which means when our focus and our connection to God, to Torah, and to mitzvahs is in a manner of not like half-heartedly lukewarm. When we're observing mitzvot, when we're learning Torah, and we're doing it like when we're doing it in a way that we and it are two things, when we're disconnected from what we're doing things by rote, just going through the motions, that means lacking das. Das means every single thing you're doing. You're saying a blessing, Baruch Ata Hashem, blessed are you, Havaya. That's the Yud. Be connected to what you're saying. Melech HaOlam, the King of the universe. You created Shahakol Nuya B'dvara. You created this water, everything, all the water and everything was made by you. As you make this blessing, that's your das, becoming very vividly aware of holiness and of godliness. We have that power inside of us, but we get that power through Moshe. And that brings me to the last thought over here, which is that this final eradication of Amalek comes out between Purim and Pesach, which is also interesting. It's between the month of Shvat and the month of Nisan, which the month of Shvat and the month of Nisan are two very, very powerful days associated with the force that fights Amalek and rids the world of Amalek. This idea is phenomenal. This idea that Amalek comes from the breaking of the holy das, and it introduces impure das. That idea is associated with when the Torah says, the Torah gives us the key when Amalek came. Amalek, the first emergence of Amalek attacking the Jewish people, is when it says the Jewish people said, Hayesh Hashem bekerbenu, is Hashem amongst us, im ayin if not. Those were the words of the Jewish, that's what the verse says. The Jewish people doubted because they were in the desert. Again, they just saw all the witnesses. I'm sorry, they saw all the clear revelations. They saw with their eyes God's mastery over the universe, God's presence. As we said earlier, the whole idea of all the plagues was to bring them to a sharp das. What happened? They didn't have water for a few days. They complained, and they were doubting, is God with them or not? And which the words the Torah use? Hayesh Hashem b'kerbenu im ayin. Is God with us or not? When you have das, then God is with you. You know God is here. The very question you're questioning, is he here or not, means there's a disconnect. So the Bnei Yissaschar says, Amalek came when? And the sages After they said, Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu, God says, you don't know that I'm here? I've been watching you all along? I swear I'm going to allow the dog to come bite you. It's like the Midrash gives an example of a father walking with a child. And the child, everything the child needs, he asks his dad, and his father gives it to him. Suddenly, he sees the child asking somebody, is my dad here? Is my dad with me? And the dad gets upset. What do you mean? I'm here. Every time you said daddy, I was right at your side. And now just because you don't see me for a moment or whatever, you think I abandoned you? I'm not here. So the father gets upset and allows the son to be, now I'm going to teach you a lesson. You'll cry out and then I'll come rescue you, but you'll feel it. That's what the Midrash tells us. And that's why Amalek came. This disconnect of Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin. Now the Bnei Yissaschar says, well, that's the same thing that happened. That yesh, that deliberation, is he or is he not? That's why it says Amalek is Gematria. The word Amalek, which is 240, is also Gematria Safek. Safek means doubt. It starts to create the tiniest doubt. In other words, it's not certain. Das, where there is das, there is certainty. Where there is questions, maybe or maybe not, doubting, that's a breach in the holy das. It's the opposite of Moshe. In Moshe, there's certainty. It's interesting. So when you go to the sin of the tree of knowledge, what does the woman say? What does Chava say? What does Eve say? When God said, why did you eat? Why did you listen to the snake? No, I'm sorry. God says to her, why did you eat from the tree? God speaks to Adam and he says, well, my wife gave me. So then God turns to Chava, what happened with you? And what does she say? Hanachash hishiani v'oichal. The snake incited me, enticed me. Hisiani means he enticed me and I ate. The word hisiani, says the Bnei Yissaschar, is made up of two words, yesh ayin. Hisiani v'oichal. It's a word by the tree of knowledge. It says hanochash the snake, hisiani. Hisiani is spelled hey shin yud aleph nun yud. He says it's the word yesh and ayin. And that's where the head is beginning to question. Is he yesh? Is God yeah or is he not? Yesh ayin. Yeah or not? And that's what it says by Amalek. The same thing. The Jewish people start. In other words, at that moment, they were back in the Garden of Eden, back at that moment where Chava and Eve is questioning yes or no. In other words, if God is concrete and absolute, there's no eating from the tree of knowledge. God said no. But if maybe he stepped away, he's a little bit above, he's a little outside of the world, maybe there's a little space where he's not. That's that disconnect. Is where the das is disconnected. Sometimes you're talking to somebody and you can sense right away that they're not here. You see when you're connecting and you can see in their eyes they suddenly went off and their thoughts are somewhere else. It's a disconnect. There's no das there. Das is that. So in Eve had a second of disconnect. Yeah, maybe snake started asking questions. God, maybe it's that little maybe between the yesh and the ayin, the yeah and the no. And that's the word hisiani, enticed me. And in that hisiani, from the yet, what it really means, from going to the concreteness of yesh, that God is, to ayin, to nothingness, meaning, to, I don't know, maybe. That's where the klipa creeps in. That's where the disconnect happens. And that's what happens. That's what happened by when the Jews went out of Egypt. The same moment happened. They were believing in God. They experienced God, but there was a moment when they got confused because there was no water and they were thirsty and the water was not given to them immediately, and they started asking, is God here? Im yesh Hashem b'kirbeinu. Im ayin. So the Bnei Yissaschar says it means, he says it's the danger. That's the klipa. It's the danger of science, the impure, study of that, which established that scientific proof is what's needed always, and if you don't have scientific proof for something, then maybe it's not. The Haskalah movement was starting very much. The movement of the Enlightenment was starting in the days of the B'nai Yissaschar, and he is saying that is the Klipas Amalek in his day. It's beginning to make people smart. The smartness of the people is that they're questioning, but not a type of questioning which is coming from a place of absolute certainty, and then you also want to understand. But rather, it's coming from a place that till I can't measure it and prove it with the scientific whatever you call method, then maybe it's not. That's the yesh. That's the yesh and ayin, and that's where the klipa completely poisons the person. That's the complete poisoning. So we find by the Chet Egel, by the sin of the golden calf, which happened by the Erev Rav. Now, the word Erev Rav, by the way, what does he say? He says something about the Erev Rav, the numeric value of Erev Rav. I'm not sure. Erev Rav. Reish Beis and Reish Beis is 400. It's 404. 470? No, 474. No, I don't remember. But in any case, they also say regarding Moshe said, I'm coming back after 40 days. What did they say? Kizeh ish Moshe, this man Moshe, lo yadanu, we don't know. There was a disconnect of the das. Lo yadanu, we don't know what happened to Moshe. Lo yadanu. At that moment, they disconnected the das from Moshe. When the Jews were disconnected from Moshe, they were prey to idolatry. Lo yadanu, we don't know. Disconnect from the holy das. What would have been the right element by the golden calf, by the eagle, is to know that Moshe is emes. Moshe is true. Moshe is certain. If Moshe said, I'm coming back in 40 days, he's coming back in 40. The scientific method, according to their calculations, the scientific method didn't work out. They started asking. They started questioning. So they counted 40 days. They counted wrong. But according to them, they were absolute that their count was right. And based on that, they started questioning. But Moshe's words should have been stronger to them. If you have a das, that Moshe is absolutely emes and true, or that Torah is emes, so all questions sometimes from what seems to be contradictory elements of science and so on and so forth, is that that the scientific measurement is just being wrong. It's not being right. Because Torah is truth. It's divine truth. It's absolute truth. Which brings me to the most important point right now. That I feel is very important. The two words Yesh and Ayin stand for two very important dates regarding our Moshe of our generation. Moshe of our generation is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as I mentioned in classes before. There is no question, and if you listen to my last class, the class of the Rambam, when we spoke with Moshe ad Moshe, I discussed all the various different proofs how Moshe and the Rebbe is one neshama. And I forgot to mention once, I'm happy I'm coming back to the subject now, a very big one. And this is from the great teaching of the story of the Baba Sali. The great Rebbe Yisrael Abba Chatzera was once asked, how come the Lubavitcher Rebbe does not come to Israel? How come the Rebbe never came to Israel? Physically. The Baba Sali said like this. These words, Moshe Rabbeinu Moses could not enter Israel. Why couldn't he enter Israel? Because Israel's holiness is the holiness equivalent to the moon. The holiness of Israel is equivalent Israel's holiness is the holiness that is represented by the moonlight, which is the revelation of God's kingship. I'm not going to go into the Kabbalah of it. The land of Israel is associated with Malchut, with kingship, which is the lowest of the 10 attributes, which is reflected in the light of the moon. Moshe's face, the sages tell us, as we see last week in the Torah portion, that Moshe's face was so bright, he just like the sun, Moshe needed a mask because the sun needs a mask. As we know that the sun has a shield, or else the sunlight would be too intense. So the sun has a mask. Moshe's face was so intense that Moshe needed to mask his face. Since Moshe is the sun, if Moshe would come into the land of Israel, said the Baba Sali, what's going to happen is that Israel would be ashamed in front of Moshe. The holiness of Israel would be dimmed in front of Moshe's light. So therefore Moshe could not come to Israel. However, the Baba Sali continued. Who was able to bring the Jewish people into Israel? Joshua, Yeshua. Regarding Yeshua, it says that his face was the light of the moon. So the light of the moon, he can come into the land of Israel without making Israel uncomfortable. When Mashiach comes, this is what the Baba Sali said, when Mashiach comes, it says the moon will be as bright as the sun. Malchut will be elevated. So Israel, the holiness of Israel, is going to be elevated. And then Moshe will be able to come to Israel. That was the Baba Sali answer. But he wasn't asked why Moshe didn't come. He was asked why the Lubavitcher Rebbe can't come. The answer that he gave was an explanation why Moshe doesn't come. So if this is in addition to everything we said in last class. So the Baba Sali, he knows things from up there, not from down here. So it's just an amazing story. So the Moshe of our generation, which is the Rebbe, has two dates that are the primary dates related to the Rebbe. One is the day the Rebbe was born, and that's in Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th day of the month of Nisan. The 11th day of the month of Nisan spells the word Ayin. Yud Aleph. Nisan, the first letter of Yud Aleph is Aleph Yud from the word Ayin. And Nisan is, the first letter is a Nun. Together spells the word Ayin. That's the Rebbe's birthday. Then the Rebbe becomes Rebbe on Yud Shvat, on the 10th day of Shvat. His father-in-law passed away. The Rebbe takes over the mantle of leadership. Yud Shvat spells the word Yesh. So Ayin and Yesh are both names or both dates with that are hinting to, rather, or expressing the idea of the Moshe of our generation. Mentioned in the last class that the Zohar says that Moshe is in every generation, but primarily in the last generation before Mashiach comes. And the Midrash says that Moshe is the first Redeemer and he's the last Redeemer. Now, what's the difference between Yud Aleph Nisan and Yud Shvat? Yud Aleph Nisan is when the light of the Rebbe, the holy soul of the Rebbe, was delivered in the world. The light of the Rebbe's neshama is plugged into the infinite light of the Ein Sof. The infinite light of the Ein Sof is called Ayin, nothingness, because it's pre-definition. Like we say in davening, we say in Psalms, May Ayin Yavai Ezri, from Ayin, from nothingness, my help will come. God's infinity and boundlessness cannot be called Yesh, can't be called something. It's called Ayin because it's pre-something. It has no definition. That's the energy of Keter, the energy of the crown. You see, there are 10 Sefirot. I'm going to get a little Kabbalistic. I'm going to do this very fast because I want to finish this class before 2 hours. So there are 10 Sefirot. The 10 Sefirot, every Sephira, every attribute is already called Yesh because it has some kind of definition. Keter, the Ein Sof, the Keter is called Ayin, nothingness, because it's still infinite and it's beyond all definition. Now, Keter, we discussed many places, number 11. It's the 11th, there's 10 Spheros, number 11. That's why the Rebbe is born on the 11th day. And his energy is an infinite energy. It's an energy of Ein Sof. It's B'li Gvul without an end. However, when the Rebbe became Rebbe on Yud Shvat, he's taking the role of the leadership of the Jewish people. And the role of the Rebbe as leader of the Jewish people is to capture that nothingness, that Ein Sof, and make it yesh, make it express itself in a very concrete, real way, in a very substantial, actualized way in the world. When the Rebbe became Rebbe, the Rebbe said, I know I am, as a Rebbe, I'm bringing this enormous power to the world, but you guys are going to have to actualize it in your actions. You're going to have to plug into this energy and live with this energy and channel it day to day to illuminate the entire world with God's light. The idea that the Rebbe becomes Rebbe is that it's capturing the Ein Sof, but making it yet, which is the function of Das. What does Das do? Das takes me'ayin from nan, the emunah, the faith that's still nothingness, it's still above, it's still infinite. And what does Das do? It concretes it. It concretizes it. It makes it yesh. It makes it something. It's the opposite of the Eitz Hadas, if you think about it. The Eitz Hadas, God was very concrete. He was very revealed to Adam and Eve. He was in a state of yesh. What does Chava do? His si'ani, she begins to take that yesh, that somebody, and makes him back ayin into nothingness. Meaning to say, a little more distant and removed from the world. He's above the world. He's outside of it. But right down over here, he's not yesh. That's why you see in the Jewish people by the Amalek thing, they also say, what's the order they say? Im yesh Hashem b'kirbeinu, im ayin, if he's not. They're taking the yesh and they're putting it back to ayin, to nothingness. The order that we're talking about is the opposite. The energy itself is an energy of ayin. That represents the nothingness, represents Ein Sof, it represents infinity, it represents... but the whole point over here is to take that undefined, infinite boundlessness of the Ein Sof, that Keter light, and to actualize it. And let me give, because we're rushed for time, I'm just going to give you a quick illustration of that idea. Most rabbis in the Jewish people, until the Lubavitcher Rebbe, when they approached or they influenced Jews, they influenced Jews not necessarily touching the nothingness of the Jew, but rather touching the somethingness. What do I mean by that? Who did they inspire? Who did they bring into the communities? Someone that has already somewhat of a Jewish identity. Someone that has already a connection. Someone who studied in yeshiva. Okay, so the rabbi is meant to make, in other words, it's called yesh mi yesh. Yesh mi yesh means something from something. You're religious already, I'll make you more religious. You attended Jewish education, I'll inspire you to become more observant, more dedicated. The Rebbe goes out and reaches the Jew in the point of nothingness, ayin, which is the essence of the soul that is just the essence. It's just the Jew, nothing else but the Jew. Think about it. The Rebbe said, I was just in Fairbanks, Alaska. I went to visit my son. He's working over there with Jewish people from a place of absolute, starting from nothing, from scratch. There's nothing there. There's just the fact that there is a Jew. That's it. And I'm not just him. So is the Chabadniks all over the world, reaching Jews. There's no pre-qualifications. There's nothing there. There's nothing to work with. Just because, in other words, a Chabadnik is not deterred by the fact that I'm meeting a Jew who says, I have no affiliation. You have no affiliation, but you're Jewish. So you're hitting the ayin. But everybody knows the Chabadnik is not going to leave you alone until you'll take that ayin and make it a yesh by putting on the tefillin. The whole Rebbe is to, on the one hand, he digs deep into the ayin, into the nothingness, and from that nothingness, he pulls that nothingness and actualizes that nothing into yesh, into something. The whole idea of Hasidus is to, on the one hand, motivate the nothingness of the Jew. The nothingness means the point of the person that's beyond any definition, the pure, simple essence of the Jewish soul. That's a piece of God from above. But with the Rebbe, so on the one hand, the Rebbe goes deep into every neshama and tickles the nothingness. But immediately, what does the Rebbe want from every person? Do a mitzvah. You say, hold it. Let's develop. Let's first study. No. The Rebbe grabs the nothingness and immediately puts it into a pair of tefillin. puts it into an action. That's one of the two extremes you see in Chabad by the Rebbe. On the one hand, it's every Jew is accepted. There's no, and if you're not going to do a mitzvah, you're still welcome. In other words, there is no pre-qualifications. A Jew is a Jew. There's no giving up on any Jew. When other Jews will say this is Erev Rav and this is this kind of person, by the Rebbe there was none of such business. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. You can speak to everybody. You can reach everybody. In other words, to reach the ayin of every single person. But on the other hand, everybody knows that one of the main characteristics, one of the main philosophies or drives, or perhaps one of the most powerful one, is that every single person must connect to an actual mitzvah. So the power from the Rebbe to touch every Jew, to reach the eye, that has to do with the Rebbe's neshama of who he is. That's not because that has nothing to do when he sits down Yud Shvat and became the Rebbe. That's the moment the soul came into the world. Moshe's neshama came into the world was filled with light. When the Rebbe is born, even as a baby of 1 day old, he's already touching all the ayin, the whole ayin. The essence of godliness is now stirred or brought forth. It's revealed in the world. It's present, and that has to do with just him being born. When the Rebbe became Rebbe on Yud Shvat, means that he's focusing that energy into something, into a leadership, into a project, into a particular mode of instruction. And that's the power to take the ayin, the nothingness, and bring it into concreteness. And that happens on Yud Shvat. That's yesh. And it's interesting. What does the pasuk say? Im yesh Hashem. If you take a word, the im and the hey, im yesh, and just take the word yesh, im yesh Hashem b'kerbenu ayin, im ayin. So if you just say the yesh and the ayin and Hashem b'kerbenu, what's that? What that means is, the way I understand it, is where is Hashem b'kerbenu? What brings the Shekhinah down? The ultimate. What's Mashiach? Mashiach is Hashem b'kerbenu. What's Mashiach? Mashiach is God will be revealed in every creature and every being for all of eternity. God will imbue the consciousness of all of existence and every being and everybody in the world fully forever and ever. Hashem b'kerbenu. It's between the ayin and the yesh. The ayin is what captures, is the Ein Sof, is the Yud Aleph, is number 11, is the limitlessness of it. The yesh is bringing it into the world, bringing it into the concreteness of the world, connecting the ayin to the, which is, again, that's the power of Moshe, that's the power of Das. Das means, the holy Das is to take an invisible, unknowable, undefined God and make him real, make him yesh, make him something. What happens with our Rebbe? So our Rebbe tells us that Mashiach is here and the Geulah is about to happen. And the Rebbe tells us that Mashiach is already revealed and that Mashiach is already affecting the world. Already the last 30 years, the Rebbe told us all of this. And just like Moshe left for 40 days and stayed up a little longer than we thought. And the Jews said, Lo yadanu, we don't know. So if we start having, God forbid, like little sveikas, if the Rebbe said Mashiach has come, did he really mean it? Is it really that Mashiach is really here? Is it really that the Geulah is about to come? Or yeah, he prayed, he hoped, he wanted, he thought, he was excited, he tried, but that's the Amalek. That right over there, right over the moment there is a question regarding the absolute certainty of that message. The Rebbe told it to us again and again and again and again. That's, God forbid, hisiani, yesh, to take what was once yesh, what once we believed, and putting it back into the ayin, back into the nothingness. No good. So what we need to do in these 30 days now, when we have to fight Amalek, is to restore our das, our absolute certainty in everything we were told. All those prophecies, the Rebbe said that now is the time of the redemption. and the Geulah is already unfolding, and that it's up to each and every one of us to start living Mashiach, to have our powerful iskashras, our powerful das. Then Hamas, and all this will automatically. It's interesting that it's the time between Yud Shvat and Yud Aleph Nisan that this war takes place, this final battle. Yesh. So unlike the scheme of the Sitra Achra of the Satan, in both stories, in the word Hisiani, the word Yesh is before the word Ayin, which means you go from Yesh, from somethingness of holiness, into nothingness, begin to question whether it is or not. Here we have, and also when the Jewish people in the desert, they said Im Yesh, Im Ayin. The opposite, however, should be the right. May ayin liyesh. We know God created the world. May ayin liyesh. From nothing to something. Which means the opposite direction. Harnessing the nothingness, the power, and bringing it into something. And once it's here and established as something, you never let it go back into a state of question. Once the Rebbe said it to us, once we've studied it and we know it for certain, it's real. And there's no doubt. There isn't even the tiniest doubt. And it's interesting that the power of ayin, of nothingness, which is the infinite power, Amalek also plugs in. Because remember, Amalek is das. Das is rooted, das goes up into Keter. It says in Kabbalah that whenever Keter, when Das is counted, Keter is not counted because Das and Keter are the same idea. Das is the very self, it's the very power, it's not the limited powers, as we said earlier. So Das is rooted in Keter, also in number 11, in the 11th power. That's why Esav, who's the father of Amalek, has 11 chiefs, the 11 chiefs of Esav. Haman, with his 10 sons, are number 11. When we read the Megillah, the first day, and we to fight Amalek, it's the power of number 11. As we know, the Mishnah Masechtas Megillah starts that Megillah Nikreis, the Megillah could be read on the 11th day, the 12th day. It starts with the 11th day. Because the entire Purim is to activate the power of number 11, the power of Yud Aleph Nisan. It's this infinite power. But what's our avoda is that it shouldn't be fluffy, it shouldn't be distant, but to act, to concretize it. It's in this time from now, two things. Number one, that I would get rid of all shaking. And the way you get rid of questions and doubt is not by philosophizing. It's by awakening from a very deep place and saying, I am not asleep. I am a Jew. Oh, and what did you see? This is so important. You watch all the Jews all the hostages that have been come out of Gaza. You can see that they're coming from a ayin liyesh. From first, when they were there, they tapped their nothing. They tapped the nothingness of their soul, which means they all came face to face with their pinta layid, they didn't have an education. They didn't have a Jewish education. They didn't have a custom of observance of mitzvahs. They were as secular. So they're starting off. Where are they digging into? They're digging into pure nothingness of their soul, which is the essence of the soul, which is higher than definition. But when they're coming out, what are they all doing? They're all connecting it to mitzvahs. This one is putting on tefillin. This one is lighting Shabbos candles. They're actualizing. It's a me'ayin liyesh experience. From first, it's the faith itself, which is the nothingness, but bringing it through the das into something. And boy, oh boy, are they displaying das. They know that God is real. They know that Shabbos is Shabbos. They know that tefillin is tefillin. So if we can only follow that, they're our teachers now. These hostages are our teachers. We don't need to prove anything. We don't need to go through. If we're in this place of question and so, all we need is to wake up from our sleep and say, I'm Jewish. I know it's true. Where do I know it? Organically. I know it in my essence. And just yell at Amalek, get out of here. No doubts. Mashiach is real. It's absolute. The Geulah is coming. It's about to happen. Without any maybes. Maybe this, maybe that. That's where the klipa comes in. With this itself, Amalek is completely destroyed. And as we discussed, physically, it's happening now. But the way we can empower it is through our activation of our das of holiness. And shaking off Amalek from ourselves completely. With that, Bezrat Hashem, we should celebrate. We shouldn't have to wait till Erev Pesach or to Yud Aleph Nisan, but already now we should merit the complete and total redemption. Me'ayin liyesh. The redemption should come from Yud Aleph, from nothingness to somethingness in a very concrete, real way. God should come into the something of the holy temple. As we say, when Amalek is destroyed, the Beis Hamikdash will be built, and Hashem will be with us in the most tangible, concrete way forever and ever. May we see that right now.